Welcome to the Athletic Skills Podcast, the show where we help sports coaches and PE teachers learn how they can impact their athletes' movement and physical development in a fun, practical way. I'm your host, Isaac, founder of Athletic Skills, and in today's episode, we'll be chatting to Scott Webb, Head of Athletic Development at Strathallan School. We'll be discussing how to integrate S&C into school curriculums, how physical activity can benefit youth athletes both physically and mentally, and Scott shares his experiences coaching children with learning difficulties. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoy the show. Now let's get started. This podcast is brought to you by Brendan Chaplin Business Coaching. Brendan guides coaches and service-based entrepreneurs to deliver their best work, build a seven-figure lifestyle and performance business, and create a life of freedom. I started working with Brendan in September 2023, and it's been a great journey since I started working with him in launching my own business, Athletic Skills. Brendan has been fully invested in me and is a great person to chat with, to share ideas, and has vast knowledge and experiences to share also. The reason I picked to work with Brendan is that he has done it himself in launching businesses and has a similar background to myself in S&C and wants to live a life that you want. If you want to speak to Brendan on how he can help create a life of freedom and guide you on that journey, get in touch with him by one of the methods in the show notes and DM him the word coach and he will start the conversation. You won't regret it and there's a good chance it might just change your life too. Hi everyone, welcome to the Athletic Skills Podcast. And I'm delighted to have Scott Webb with me today. So thank you, Scott, for coming to join us.
Thank you very much. Honoured to be on.
And do you just want to give a bit of background on what you've been up to and where you are now as well?
So I've been working in S&C for 10 years. I think like pretty much most of us that go into strength and conditioning really enjoyed sports as a kid. Played pretty much every sport under the sun growing up. And then when I got to 18, started doing my first bits in strength and conditioning, it became that I couldn't really do Saturdays for fixtures anymore. I ended up getting into powerlifting and it went pretty well. I've been doing that for over a decade now. And that was my route in sport. And then I was at went to Hartbury College when I was 16 and I didn't end up leaving there until I was 22. Stayed around there for a fair bit and got exposed to many sports and a really good strength and conditioning team.
You're still doing powerlifting now? You're still competing?
Still competing. I need to try and actually find where I'm going to fit one in this year. But yeah, the goal is definitely still stay on the platform. And hopefully now I'm up in Scotland, try and get a couple of caps for representing Scotland.
So you got the both sides of the coin of being an athlete and a S&C coach as well. So you can see both sides of it.
Yeah, and how it can be a part-time job, just trying to do that alongside everything else.
Yeah.
Which is quite relevant working with youth as well.
Yeah, it must help. We're trying to relate to how your athletes may be feeling in certain situations as well as a coach. So it's quite a nice thing to have alongside, which not many will have. So yeah, we were chatting previously around your passion around S&C in schools and S&C around youth athletes. Do you just want to dive in a little bit more around why you're so passionate around this area?
Yeah, I just think there's so much change you have. Like I've enjoyed when working with professional athletes, and maybe it was the nature of the internships that I did, but I felt like there was only so much you could add. It was almost, right, let's get you ready. There's a game on the weekend. Let's crack on, get you feeling good and have a great time. Whereas I think there's such huge impact, not just within the physical side of working with youth, but actually on their overall life and helping them shape where they want to go. And I've just always found that really rewarding when working with the younger age groups.
And then with your role at the moment, so you're currently head of athletic development at Strathallan School. What's going well with your role currently? And then how are you also integrating S&C into your school as well?
They had S&C before, but it wasn't a full-time role and it was an add-on to someone else's job. So it was going in and actually getting the gym ready, in essence, to be used as a coaching and teaching facility. So it's very much, they might just come in, the supervised by a member of staff, they do a little bit of what they want, and then they leave. Whereas now every child's got a program and there's a pathway to follow. So I think the biggest achievement is maybe the diversity we've managed to get into the gym this year. I think previously it was quite dominated by just rugby, whereas we've got over 300 pupils who are using the gym weekly, and 525 sessions is the most we've done in 1 week in terms of getting numbers through the door and kids enjoying it, having a buzz about S&C, being a really big success this year.
And I'm sure that you in that week where you did that many sessions, I'm sure you slept well at the end of the week.
Very well at the end of that.
And then you mentioned before as well around you integrating SC into PE. How does that look as well into your PE curriculum?
There's perhaps less of that Strathallan because we have our games program. It definitely happened a lot more at Burford. Quite different schools as well. Burford is a state school, whereas Strathallan's a private school. But when we were at Burford, it was right. I took over that role in the middle of COVID almost. So my job interview was, can you deliver a athletic development session to 6 key worker pupils? And at this point, I was like, I haven't left my house in 2 months. I don't know if I can still coach. But it went well. We got the job. And then Pete Green, who's the director of sport at Burford, was very much, I've got a real interest in movement and strength conditioning, but I don't have expert knowledge in this area. So I need someone to come in. And the ethos became high challenge, high support movement, which is really interesting off the back of COVID, where obviously a lot of people sat down in front of screens for a long period of time. I think it was Simon Brundage shared it the other day, where I think the average plank held by pupils using his app at the moment was like 5 seconds, which is pretty terrifying stat for the state of youth fitness. But in terms of the actual integration, there was loads of different ways in. It was also, how do we add value to a PE program rather than, it needs to be strength and conditioning? How do we add value to it? One route in that was the extracurricular. So what extra opportunities can we provide to students? And that became 2 separate pathways. We had a movement scholars pathway, which was for kids that were disaffected by PE. They might be the ones that are last out of the changing room. They have pretty poor self-efficacy, physical competency. So what can we do to help them access physical activity better? And that was done at lunch times. And then we had a separate sort of pathway, which is our high performance program, which was for those kids who had sporting aspirations to push on, get S&C support to help them get to the next level. Whether that was just getting consistently to represent school, whether that was to get into the district setup, county setup, from county to national. And that's what that was set up to achieve.
That sounds great. And so now you've seen both sides around state and private schools. Is there any big differences in terms of how S&C is delivered, or how fundamental movements have been delivered across states and private schools?
Facilities being the number one. Strathallan, I'm really lucky. I've got a fully dedicated gym facility that doesn't get touched by anyone else. It doesn't have multi-purpose use. Obviously, staff can come in and use it when they want. There is a dedicated space to deliver an S&C facility program. Whereas in a state school, is very much, we have no equipment. When I first went in, the little like body power plates you might get, like the tiny little studio weights. We had a box of them that was very old, and some of the sand was coming out of the weights. So you had to get quite creative, and it was made easier because obviously there was nothing there before, that the training age of students was quite low. It was getting really creative with the utilization of tempo, how we use stability. But we started with one group of year 10 students who were a particularly talented year group. And that flourished from being just 10 students using it to over 150 students getting a weekly in a state school setting. But there were still times where I was having to deliver strength conditioning sessions around exam desks because the sports hall was set up for exams. So that's probably the biggest difference. And then at Strathallan, we're also a boarding school. So we're really lucky that kids are on site the majority of the time. So actually getting access to them to be able to deliver sessions to them becomes much easier than trying to fit it into a 50-minute lunchtime period where you still need to make sure that they eat, because that's really important.
And a lot of things around that I'm trying to show is around S&C being practical for PE teachers and sports coaches. And it sounds like you had to be very creative around your work in your state school that you worked with before. Have you got any things that work well for you in terms of not having any equipment at all, or very limited equipment, that some PE teachers could maybe transfer to start to integrate some sort of S&C or fundamental movement coaching into their sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. So we integrated it into the curriculum. So we had a dedicated for Key Stage 3, which is years 7, 8, 9. We had a dedicated scheme of work which was called Movement Fundamentals, which was very much sort of athletic motor skill competencies put into games. So an example of that might be we're trying to work on acceleration. So we're playing a game of cat and mouse. So our learning objective for that part is that we are trying to improve acceleration. So then might be, right, so how do we check that's being obtained? Are they hitting the acceleration shapes we'd like? When asked to coach someone else, what language are they using? So we'd have year 7s going, I am accelerating, so I want to be like an aeroplane taking off that low to high. It might be that they're cued piston legs. They're trying to drive, get that switch and driving forwards and back. So that became how we were working that within the curriculum, movement fundamentals. Then it might be we want to work on body strength and bracing. So we're doing build the web, bear crawl position. Can you move the cones out? Can you now do it whilst only having one hand on the floor and using your feet to challenge stability? So it just became, particularly when you've got class of 30, you're going to have very different individuals in front of you. It became really clear that this was the learning objective. This is your activity. These are your progressions and regressions. So there's differentiation. And that was really key in the school because that was the part where the teachers went. I remember one of our PE teachers going to me, Scott, I can't believe that is an hour lesson. And then they did it and they were like, but they're all really enjoying it. And all they did was run about up and down, chasing each other, moved a few cones and did some jumping and balancing. And within that, you ticked loads of different boxes of athletic motor competencies, which was obviously part of our ethos. So that was really interesting. The teacher was like, oh, this actually works.
Yeah, and there's a lot of missing there around S&C and what S&C might look like. And so something like that being fun at the centre of that session is quite nice to show other teachers what S&C may look like in terms of being integrated into PE.
It's really, because another teacher said, we're not a circus. We're not here to just entertain. So although we want sessions to be fun, he used the analogy of if you let kids pick their dinner every day of the week, it might be fish and chips and ice cream for dessert, which we know is probably not best in long term. So there definitely needs to be that balance between we want it to be fun and we want it to be really engaging, but we still need to know what the objective is and not deviate from that. The other one that we did when they became a bit older around year 9, maybe the gyms maybe weren't robust in who they let in around the area. So you'd have these year 9s that would go to the gym, hit bench press, and with possibly not great form, possibly too heavy. So one thing we added into the health-related exercise scheme of work, which was year 9 and above, was actually resistance training. And again, we didn't have brilliant facilities to facilitate that maybe as a more traditional method, but it then became that manipulation and clear movement curriculum. Right, your level 1 is this. Eccentric only press up. You only have to go on the way down. Level 2 might be an incline press up. Start really high, make your way down. It then might be that level 3 is a press up. It then might become a tempo press up. It then might become an offset press up. It might become a single arm slider press up. So all of those different levels without requiring any equipment. You've got multiple weeks worth of progressions there, because if you've ever done a single arm press up, they're really difficult.
And
So
it's
it's
great
just
for
using that creativity.
Yeah, and it'd be great for the kid to then see their progression, which is hard in other PE sessions or even sports sessions to actually see progression. Whereas if they're seeing different movements that they're now doing, then it'd be great benefit for them to see how they're progressing in their movement and their overall physical development.
Yeah. There's one thing that I think I really neglected as well when I first went in to the role is in S&C, we become really hyper focused on what we do and go, this is brilliant. Actually, PE is also really brilliant. And we need to make sure that actually what we do supports what's happening rather than competes against it. So looking at things like head, hand, heart, how are we actually doing it? So there is still an education piece because PE can't just become people going in the gym, people just doing movement stuff, because there's no education for that. So how do we actually then include that education side into it? And it might be that you're working on accelerations. You actually explain really explicitly, this is acceleration. This means I'm speeding up. And that's how we start getting that education piece in as well, which is probably something that being around a really good PE team helped me understand. It's definitely something I neglected at sort of the start of that role.
And it's like a lot of jobs or a lot of roles within sport or within schools. It's working with a multidisciplinary team, and everyone's focused on the same goal, developing that youth athletes, develop physical development, and also for a healthy relationship with exercise for after school as well, that they're confident enough to go to the gym, but also competent as well to be able to move well as well. So yeah, that sounds great. And then you mentioned a little bit around what you do with different age groups or different years. Have you got any tips on how that may look like from a primary school perspective and then up to a sixth form or a year 11 stage?
Yeah, I think just going back to the previous points first, I think there's actually more impacts that S&C coach should have in the curriculum as well. If we think about how in a school we might lead some of the extracurricular stuff in terms of what's more traditional S&C, I think injury-wise, how often does a kid get injured and they stand at the side of a pitch and just put out cones and hold a stopwatch? I just feel like we can do a lot better than that. And that's really hard as a teacher, because you're also trying to do 29 other students whilst keeping that one involved. But a prime example of how, when we talk about what is the impact of something, which is something that's discussed in schools a lot, you're going to get growth-related injuries in a school setting. And it's something that maybe within teacher training, because it's not discussed, it's not understood very well. So actually having help sheets that if this kid is presenting with Achilles pain, this is what you might need to adapt to still keep them engaged in your session. If it's really bad, here's some help sheets they can access so they can still do activities, working on their balance. Maybe they could do some upper body strength, then have the same for things like knee pain, things like your Osgood Schlatters. But that was one thing that was a really big impact. It just made sure that everyone was involved and the kids and parents actually really appreciative of that. And then even further down that sort of route, if there is an injury for someone from the high performance group, we actually then just did their S&C lesson within their PE lesson. If it was something they couldn't engage in, it might be there's an activity they can still get a lot of value from, but they'll still do it. And then one of the most rewarding ones was a young lad who had a spine condition. He had surgery on it. So he basically had two big plates either side and couldn't do any contact sport. That's somewhat of an issue when you're not even allowed a risk of falling. So even engaging in something like touch rugby is not accessible. That kid then got full S&C in his games lessons for 6 months. So rather than him missing out on massive parts of his development, we still kept him engaged. And I think that is another place where S&C can have huge impacts in schools. How do we make those kids that otherwise might fall through the cracks feel like a superstar? And for me, that's really important moving forward.
No, it's really good. And we always see that those kids that either on a rounders pitch stood at the side of a pitch or in a football game, the last person to be picked because they're really not interested, or like you mentioned, the last person out of the changing room to come and play sports. It's how making sure we engage with all of those, which will probably take us on to one of the other points we're going to further discuss around S&C from a performance perspective and some conceptions out there that might look completely different in terms of training for participation or just training for actual performance. What are your thoughts around that?
The Calvin Giles quote for me of not everyone is an athlete, but everyone can be more athletic is no more relevant than for that sort of discussion. Why should performance look massively different to participation? It might be that you dedicate more hours to your craft where you're doing performance. It might be, so for example, at Strathallan, we're looking to implement a tiered system to a lifestyle curriculum as well. So it breaks me if you go to a kid, could you name something you get a good source of protein from? And they go, oh yeah, banana. And you go, okay, that's concerning. But also if you've never been taught it, you're not going to know. So it's actually really important that we become the expert delivering this, because otherwise they'll go find it on TikTok. And that can be an absolute shambles in terms of them getting their education because it's not vetted. It can be anyone delivering it. But yeah, everyone should get access to high quality strength conditioning, the high quality PE, the high quality game. Because if we're in an epidemic where kids are weaker, they're less active, they're less resilient, well, something needs to change. Something's clearly not working. That shouldn't all be put on schools. We need to look wider in society about why that's happening. But yeah, just simple things that kids just don't want to see, don't want to fail. They don't want to, in front of their peers, fail. So we know as part of physical literacy, they have not got the confidence to take a part in an activity. Do they feel motivated? They're more than happy to sit in front of their Xbox. If they don't want to join into it, they're not motivated. Do they have a knowledge and understanding? If they're telling me that a banana is a good source of protein, probably not. If they can't tell me any benefits of physical activity, probably not. And then underpinned by a lot of them that we have a direct impact to, if you can't move very well, if you can't swim, you're going to be pretty rubbish at water polo. So how are we given enough opportunities for everyone to succeed? And that for me is why there's very little difference between participation and performance. We need to give everyone equal opportunity. That might not work because some kids might just have much more love for it and work much harder, so they'll see more progress. At the entry point, if we were a maths teacher and our students left unable to do a times table, we'd be like, you failed. What were you doing all those years? But kids are leaving school physically illiterate. They might not be able to run very far. They can't jump. If you got them to hold their body position, they'd crumble. And that is where we've got a massive issue and where I feel a lot of resource needs to be directed to improve. Because as a byproduct, I genuinely believe that will help a lot more with confidence and motivation due to those social factors of, I'm not going to look silly because I can actually do this. So maybe I'll be more likely to give it a go.
And I think a lot of people forget about the benefits of physical exercise on the mental well-being as well, especially this time of year, especially with exam season. Like how many kids, I'm sure you've seen it as well, that miss sport or miss PE or miss an S&C session because they have to go and do some revision for an hour, but then completely missing the benefits that physical activity could actually have on revision, and also having a mental break from actually reading, and then you may be able to take more in. I'm sure there's a lot of education needed around that as well.
It's like the DJ decks. It might be that you're a really sporty athlete and you do need to bring the volume down in sport a little bit. That's okay, because the exams right now, they are more of a priority because they're now going to affect where you go to your next stage. But if you're only getting 2 hours of physical activity a week and there's now a clinic for English you need to attend, you only get 1 hour a week, and actually you skip the next one because you want to go do some revision, you're getting no hours of physical activity a week and you just sat down loads. And that's a real issue, and it's a matter of priorities, and it needs to become more of a priority, because if we don't value it as teachers, a whole school, if it's not valued and someone's going, oh, don't worry, you can miss that because it's just that, it's just PE, then that sets the precedent to the kid. Well, that's not important because my teacher's happy for me to miss it. And that's where some of the issues also come from.
And yeah, just going back to one of your other points around, you've seen a lot of kids that may not have the confidence or the fear of failure, especially around S&C or do some fundamental movements. Have you got any tips or advice of what's worked well in changing that mindset of those kids to get their buy-in and get them starting to move and be interested in what you're coaching?
They don't know how much you care until you show you care. Use the name. That's a rip. Rather than, oh yeah, can you come here? Direct, Isaac, oh, can you just come over here a second? What you did to help them. If you go up to someone straight away and go, oh, that's not very good, try this, they're probably going to go, who's this? I don't want to speak to them. They're just telling me I'm rubbish. So how can you frame things to try and catch them having success? Not just well done, because that might not be the best feedback. Sometimes it might work, but it's not particularly good feedback. That action was really good when you did this. Well done, Isaac. So just framing that positive feedback. Bring a mate. How many people don't want to come because their mate's not coming? Once they come with their friend and see it's a nice environment, that then might be that their friend can't make it one day, so they still come. And it might be they're talking to their mates at lunchtime and they go, oh yeah, this is really cool. We do this. So then their mate asks, can I come? Because I'd like to give that a try. And then it's almost a snowball effect. Word of mouth is the best advertisement, right? So that snowball effect of they really enjoy it, they keep coming, that then has massive implications. And that's how we got a lot of the kids to attend. Make a big deal about it, make it almost a prestigious thing, then let the rope go and let more and more into it. So yeah, definitely it is just it's a nice environment. Music, that could something as simple as music. If you've got terrible tune, you come in, the gym's a mess, and you sit down for the session and just watch them. That's not a good environment you want to be in. If you're on your feet, having a discussion with them, helping them, giving them time to themselves if they need it, come back in and give them some support. That's a really nice environment to be a part of. And then how would you then create that around other people? You might have friction. If you work in a school with 1,500 people, not everyone's going to be best mates. How do you deal with that conflict when it arises? And it's just all about creating a really good environment. Because if they like you, it's a nice environment they can come into. They're probably going to stick around, particularly when they start seeing the benefits of it, which come a little bit quicker in youth athletes, which is pretty beneficial.
I think that transfers a lot to not just youth athletes, but in general, on life in general, around creating a good environment and also trust and building relationships with people to get people to buy into what you're doing. And yeah, so I'm quite keen to chat because you mentioned before around your passion when we were chatting before around working with kids with learning difficulties. So it'd be great to chat about what your experience in doing S&C or P with kids that have learning difficulties and what might differ and what might work well in terms of working with these sort of athletes.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a spectrum. There may be learning difficulties, but some of them can be minor and some of them can be quite a lot of learning difficulties. So it's making sure that we treat everyone like an individual. Just because you have ADHD, just because you have autism, doesn't mean that something that works for you will work for everyone else. There might be themes, but it's really important that people are still treated as an individual. For me, the biggest benefit was actually somewhere they felt really special. I'm getting invited. I get to do small group sessions here. That could go the other way. It could be if they're really socially aware, they're like, oh, I have to come to this. And that's why we didn't make it compulsory. If you want to go offer your friends and do whatever, you're more than welcome to. But actually, 99% of them still stayed. And it became that kids that have SEN are more likely to be bullied as well in schools. So if you have a learning difficulty, you're more likely to be bullied. That then also gives them a safe space. If they're having issues at lunchtime with groups, it gives them another safe space away from that, where they can still interact with other students, which I think is really important. Yeah, but for me, the main things for an ASD was posture issues, balance issues, and muscular endurance issues. So we didn't measure any of this. It would have been really good to in hindsight, but even simple things like improving posture relate to that child's not falling out of their chair. They're not fidgeting as much. That's if you're in a classroom and you're trying to study something, that is a huge distraction if you can't sit in your chair properly. It might be that you really struggle in PE because your posture, muscle endurance, and balance is really bad. So it's about getting that optimal challenge point for them. That child might not have much success in front of their peers in a physical activity. We know that's actually quite important to youth. So in our sessions, it was trying to find something that they could do really well in front of their mates and celebrate the hell out of it. It was like, oh my goodness, I was like, that was amazing. Well done. Just really simple things like that. Massive smile. Constantly engaged. It's all of a sudden like they've put high voltage batteries in them and they're running about doing other stuff now. It was just trying to find their superpower. It was then trying to break it down. So key one, play rounders with someone who's got really poor movement skills. You throw the tiny ball, you miss with a tiny bat, you try and run to first base. Brilliant. That's your games lesson. Actually, get a tennis racket, get a tennis ball or a big bouncy ball, you can hit it way further. You've got more opportunities. Something as simple as that differentiation becomes really important to them.
Yeah, and I think I've found working in S&C with kids with ADHD, maybe some are really bought into it and they're a completely different person to they are in other environments. They see the challenge, they see the progression, and it stimulates them in different ways. I've also found strategies around simple things like kids don't know train with mirrors around them. So as soon as you just take them away from the mirrors, or you turn them a different way and they're moving in a different area, then suddenly they're a different person because they can't see themselves or so. So it's finding that, like you mentioned, finding different strategies for that individual that might work well, and each person's different.
But it's coming back to that spectrum we talked about. There's no reason you can't have SEND and not be in the high performance group. Because you can still be brilliant in sport. People forget that. They almost treat it as like they can be right up here. You can be super high performing. So it's being aware of that in a session. Because if you're already sensitive to sound and you're blasting out music, you're creating so much overload for that individual. And that's not a reasonable thing to do. You need to make sure you're looking after them. And it's the same, like if you're doing exercise, one of the things with ASD that might happen is communication difficulty. Physical activity is shown to reduce those difficulties. It might be that attention is another one, particularly for ADHD. That attention span is improved once completing physical activity. So actually, why don't we try doing things like movement breaks? That was another strategy. We had one child who wasn't on a full program, and in one of their spares they had, rather than sitting in the learning zone and just doing some reading, they actually came out and did some physical activity, almost like a reset. How do we help this kid then get back? And it's not just, go out and kick a football about by yourself. There might be physical activity, but there's very little quality to it. And it's almost a cop-out. We'll just fill their time. Whereas if they're doing something structured with a learning outcome, one, you still get the benefits of physical activity, but two, it's something structured to help them develop. And if we're not trying to provide the best opportunities for our students, we're failing. So that's another thing that's really important to me.
No, that's great. And I think it's something that isn't really discussed too much, or there isn't too much information out there around working with kids with learning difficulties around sport and PE and S&C. And like you mentioned, there shouldn't really be too much different because some can be really good in that area. So it's just working with that individual. So just to wrap up, have you got, if we had a sports coach or a PE teacher and they want to start integrating some form of S&C into their coaching and impacting their youth athletes' movements tomorrow, have you got any tips on where this person may start to get some quick wins into their coaching?
Start small, start simple. I think if you try to do everything too fast, too quickly, it tends to not have the same amount of quality. Try to include something in your warm-up. A really simple way that you could try to improve it. You could have a movement of the week. So it might be that actually a pogo, we're trying to improve reactivity, a pogo comes movement of the week. You have that in every games PE lesson to do. It might be the next week, you want to improve lower body strength. So it might be something like you bring some tennis balls out, you're on a court, split squat position, start the ball high, catch it low. Can you catch it before that? Start standing it. Can you then catch it down low? Really simple things like that. And there's some really good information out there. Like Ben Pullen is producing loads and loads of different movement games. No shame in saying some of them made it into the tier 2 of our movement fundamentals curriculum. If something is good out there, use it. Just make sure you know why you're using it. You see it quite often where someone go, oh yeah, I did this because I saw it on Teach PE. But actually, does that link into your lesson objective? Or is it just something random you've added? So for me, start small, try to include it in your warm-up. Did it meet the lesson objective? Did the kids enjoy it? Is there a way you can now progress it moving on week? For me, that would be a really good starting point to try and get strength conditioning into those PE and games lessons.
No, that's great. And there's some great things that a sports coach or a PE teacher can take away with there and easily integrate it into their warm-up without impacting their current session that's going on. But no, thank you, Scott, for your time. Really appreciate it. Have you got any ways, if anyone's got any questions, to get in touch with you, if anyone wants to chat further on anything you've discussed today?
Yeah, Twitter or Instagram. On Insta a lot, as obviously all powerlifters are. So yeah, Twitter or Instagram, or via email, and probably put them in at the end.
I'll put them in the description as well, for people to get in touch. But no, thank you very much, guys, for listening, and thank you, Scott, for joining us, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Great talking, Isaac. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Athletic Skills Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it helpful in learning more about impacting your youth athletes' movement and physical development. If you did enjoy this episode, please take a moment to give us a like, subscribe, and share to any other coaches or teachers that you think it may help. Also, if you have any feedback or topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or on the email in the description, and we'll be more than happy to try and tackle those challenges you are facing as a sports coach or a PE teacher. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I look forward to speaking to you soon.